Before today, 2v2 have always been a joke game mode, mostly because of the lack of stakes in the game mode, aka no ranked or trophies. Being a very unserious game mode means people did not try hard enough to figure out the meta strategies. Sure, it was used in competitive formats before, but a few matches are never enough to dictate an entire meta playstyle for any game mode. However, everything will change today with the release of 2v2 ladder. Now every player will want to try hard to get to the top, which brings the question, how different is it from 1v1s? First thing, when we start a 1v1 match, the structure of the arena sides look like this, but for 2v2 it changes drastically, as you can clearly see. What I noticed here is, unlike 1v1, the tower troops are not the same on both sides. Normally when you want to start first in 1v1, it wouldn't matter if you play a wizard on the right side or the left side, as it's just the same. But here in this case, I have a princess tower and my teammate has a cannoneer, so if I want to play a wizard in the back, it's best to make him cover the cannoneer side because it's weaker to swarm. This also applies to the opponent side because, as you can see here, the towers they have are not always identical. If they have a cannoneer on one side, it makes sense for me and my teammate to do our graveyard push over there, since it would give us more value from our skeletons. But if they have a dagger duchess and we were playing giant, then we should be aiming towards pushing on that side, since she is weak to beat down pushes. Besides the crown towers, the king tower was also moved a bit to the side and then got duplicated. The new king tower size is actually a massive game changer because it makes the king tower activations much easier. Like, even a snowball could get a king activation against a miner because of how close it is to the crown towers. And also it makes the range on your king tower reach more units due to it being closer to the bridge than the 1v1 king towers. For instance, a miner on the old safe spot isn't safe anymore because of the king tower that got pushed closer towards him to fit the second one beside it. However, the most important part is the fact that you have two of them. Yes, each king has his own cannon, so activating the king tower in 2v2 offers double the DPS it does in 1v1, which causes many major interaction changes. For example, a goblin barrel would get fully countered with a zap on its own. The cool thing is, even if they tank for it, two king towers would still take it out quick enough anyway. Oh, and graveyard is... The insane value makes it almost a must to have either Tornado or Fisherman on one of the players to secure King Tower activations, while also making cards that activate King Tower a worse pick overall. Like, look at this dumb Firecracker. They don't even have to do anything for King activation now. Now, I'm not saying to never use Firecracker, all I'm saying is be very annoying with it, so they would have to spell it on your own side. Just never let it cross the river on its own because it's a free King Tower activation. This usually works with everything, like an Electro Dragon on his own is a free King Tower activation, but if you plop an Elixir Golem in front of him, then you would force your opponent to deal with him as soon as he crosses the river. Besides the technicalities of the different tower layouts, the game still plays mostly the same with no major changes. But in 2v2, your skill is no longer the most important part because teamwork matters much more. Like, you can't really count on the skills of counting card cycles and counting Elixir because you're playing against two players at the same time. For example, if a golem gets played and then a bomber gets played after it, we can't tell if the bomber was on the same deck as the golem or if it was with the other player, therefore we can't know when the cycle will be back to the golem. You can use some clues, like if a lava hound and a cannon card were played at the same time, you can tell that both players spent elixir and they were on different decks, so you could punish on the opposite lane. But other than that, you can't do much, so all your focus should be on team synergy to prevent this from happening. And these kind of issues are not just two spells on the same troop kind of situation. Sometimes it can be something like a building they play messing up your log's pushback, or two buildings messing up the position of one another. Usually these mistakes are just... What the fuck, bro? To stop this, you want to communicate. For example, Abdod, can you play a balloon behind my lumberjack? Alright, Abdod, but only if you subscribe and hover your arrows just in case. You got it, Abdod. Consider it done. Now, I'm not saying that you should play with yourself because it's kinda hard to focus on two devices. What you should do instead is get on a Discord call with a friend, as the real-time communication would make your moves more in sync as if you are one player. But if you don't have any friend and end up playing with some random, it will be slightly harder, but in-game communication still exists. First of all, clicking on your teammate's name reveal their current card cycle and elixir count. Knowing what they have in hand can and should influence the decisions you actively make in the game. Like here, if I notice that they don't have any spells in hand and there is a skeleton barrel coming our way, I can safely rage without worrying about double spells. Or if I see a Hog Rider in his hand, I can play my bomber on the side as a signal for him to play his Hog Rider in front, which would make it a more coordinated and well thought out push. Aside from that, I also usually like to always have the card I want to play next on the field like this as an indicator for my random teammate, so he knows what I plan on doing next. The way it looks for them would be something like this, and it would have some delay, so that's why I try to hover it a couple seconds before I want to actually play it. All you have to do is just, instead of tapping the lightning on the witch like this, just hover the lightning for a few seconds and pray your teammate has a functioning brain cell to understand what you're hinting at. The elixir count is also helpful because you wouldn't want a golem in the back when your teammate is at 0 elixir. Generally, I recommend being at the same elixir count as your teammate, as attacking together as a team is always more effective as you can store up to 20 elixir at a time. And defending together as a team is more effective as one player might not have the necessary responses in which his partner can cover up for him then. The best way to sync your elixir is to leave small defenses like random wall breakers to the person with the higher elixir count, or when attacking, instead of having one player play the giant and the prince at the same time, have each player deploy one of them. Having an orchestrated push isn't good only because it keeps you both at the same elixir, but it also is necessary because it's harder to find yourself with 10 elixir on 2v2. The reason is, in 1v1s, elixir is generated a tiny bit quicker, so if I push with a Sparky in the back, I would be able to deploy a mini P.E.K.K.A and a goblin giant before it reaches the bridge. But in 2v2, the elixir bar is slightly slower, so if I deploy a Sparky at 10 elixir, I wouldn't be able to play both the goblin giant and the mini P.E.K.K.A with it immediately. Needless to say, me suggesting orchestrated pushes should be a giveaway that having similar decks is the best way to play 2v2. If you're playing a Lava Hound deck, it's better to have your friend also play a Lava Hound deck, because with that, every card in your deck would synergize with every card in their deck. If you are playing Giant Double Prince and your friend was playing a Lava Hound deck, then the prince would be kinda useless if you had a Lava Hound push going. Just to be clear, I'm not saying you should 100% copy paste the same deck, because a Lava Loon deck would still mix well with a Lava Miner deck. Or like how Hog Rider decks would still mix well with Royal Hog's Earthquake decks, as they both have similar playstyles and supporting spells or troops. In fact, I would recommend some variety in something like spells where one player would have lightning while the other one would have fireball, as it would give you more flexible options in general. Even changing some of these supporting troops can be great, as having someone run an Electro Dragon while the other run an Inferno Dragon is better than having two Electro Dragons. If you are playing with a friend, I personally recommend you both use a cycle deck, because their troops are usually cheaper and faster, so it can force out mistakes more often. But keep in mind that the 2v2 meta has more splash cards than usual, because there is generally more troops on the arena, allowing splash cards to get more value. So it's best to avoid decks like Royal Hogs, because they will literally never connect on tower, so just use alternatives like Hog Rider instead. Another reason to pick cycle is because 2v2 is generally a more defensive game mode, and cycle decks excel at that. Besides the extra king tower, the reason it's defensive is because taking damage in 2v2 is more punishing than 1v1 due to the increased amount of spells in play. Like, I'm not exaggerating, for some decks, if the enemy tower is at like 2000 HP, it's already borderline at spell cycle range, which is crazy. Like, bro, that's like half their tower. The only time I would recommend beatdown over cycle is when you're trying to carry a random player, because it's less reliant on teamwork and can do better without help. Imagine if you are playing Logbait, chances are your opponents will have like 4 small spells. Normally, if both you and your partner are playing Logbait at the same time, then it would be fine, because you would have double princesses, double goblin gangs, and double goblin barrels, so you would be able to bait out spells, decently enough. But if you are alone, there would be just one of each, making it damn near impossible to get a barrel connection on their tower. And to win, you would have to get a ton of connections, because realistically, even if they ignore a single barrel, it wouldn't do enough damage to win you a game. But playing a beatdown deck like a Goblin Giant P.E.K.K.A, you might find that small window of error and get a good push going, and usually one good push can win you an entire game. Other than that, you need to keep in mind that the average player is for some reason always gonna play aggressively. For this reason, I would always save some elixir for defense just to be able to cover up for the silly mistakes your random partner might make. Trust me, you will always find a good opportunity to push, so just be patient and try to keep your towers healthy throughout the game. Oh, and one last thing, when you deploy 2 troops at around the same time, the one that gets deployed second will be pushed in front, so try not to get your mini P.E.K.K.A killed like that if you are on voice chat with someone. Actually, you know what? I'm sure everyone will be complaining about teammates throwing games and leaving the match, so why don't you use the comment section to find teammates for 2v2 ladder, my dudes?